My daughter called me on a Tuesday evening in October, which was already strange because she never called on weekdays. She texted, always texted. So when I saw her name on my phone screen, I picked up immediately thinking something was wrong. Something was wrong, just not in the way I expected. "Mom," she said, and her voice had that careful, measured quality I'd come to recognize over the years. The voice she used when she wanted something and was deciding how to ask for it. "Kevin and I have been talking. We think it might be a good idea if we consolidated the family finances. Pooled things together, made it more efficient." I was 64 years old. I'd taught high school English in Oakville, Ontario for 31 years. I had buried my husband 2 years before, standing in the November cold at Trafalgar Cemetery while my daughter held my arm and told me everything was going to be okay. I had a pension. I had savings. I had the house on Maple Grove that my husband and I had paid off together. The house where my daughter had grown up, where she'd had her first sleepover and her grad photos and her going-away party when she moved to Vancouver with Kevin. "Consolidated how?" I asked. "Well, Kevin has a financial advisor. He's really good. And we thought, since you're on your own now and the market's been unpredictable, maybe we could manage things together. You could transfer the RRSPs into a joint investment account. It's just safer." I told her I'd think about it. I didn't leave a note. I didn't table. I just sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea that I filed it away in the pot of my mind where I kept things that made me uncomfortable but that I wasn't ready to look at directly. My daughter had always been ambitious. Kevin had always been the kind of man who talked about money at dinner. I told myself it was just them being practical. 3 weeks later, she called again. This time, she'd done research. She had numbers. She talked about tax efficiency and spousal RRSPs and something called a family trust that Kevin's advisor had apparently set up for other clients in similar situations. She said the word estate planning 4 times in 12 minutes. I counted. "Sweetheart," I said, "I have a financial advisor at RBC. I've had her for 20 years. I'm fine." "Mom, no offense, but bank advisors aren't actually advisors. They're just salespeople. Kevin's guy is independent. He's fee only. He does this for people like you all the time." "People like you." I let that go. "What I want to tell you, what I need you to understand before I get to the part of the story that I am still, 2 years later, not entirely able to say out loud without my hand shaking, is that I was not a naive woman. I was not the kind of person who gets taken in by things. I taught teenagers for 3 decades. I knew when I was being managed. I knew the shape of a manipulation even when it came wrapped in a daughter's voice. But grief does something to you. That is the thing nobody tells you about losing a spouse of 38 years. It doesn't just make you sad. It makes you doubt your own judgment. Every decision feels enormous because you used to make them with someone and now you make them alone. And the silence where his opinion used to be is so loud that sometimes you just want someone else to handle it. My daughter knew that. I didn't know if she knew it, but she knew. In December, I agreed to a meeting with Kevin's advisor. His name was Timothy, and he had an office in a glass tower in downtown Vancouver and a kind of careful friendliness that reminded me of the students who came to me for extensions on essays. Charming because they needed something, not because they liked you. He had a firm handshake and a laminated chart, and he explained everything very slowly, which I did not appreciate. My daughter sat beside me at that meeting. Kevin sat on her other side. Every time Timothy said something complicated, she would turn to me and say, "See, that's exactly what I was telling you about, Mom." Like she was translating, like I needed translating. I did not sign anything that day. I flew home to Oakville feeling unsettled in a way I couldn't name. I called my friend Wanda, who had known me since we were young teachers sharing a photocopier in the English department. I told her about the meeting. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Sylvia, you know you don't have to do any of this, right?" I did know that. I just needed someone to say it. In January, I got a letter from my bank. Not a statement, a letter, flagging unusual activity on one of my accounts, a joint account that my daughter had been added 2 years ago, back when she was in university, and I'd put her on there so she could access emergency money if she ever needed it. I had forgotten she was still on it. 2 transfers had been made in December, one for $12,000, one for $8,000, both to an account I didn't recognize. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time with that letter in my hands. The house was very quiet. Outside, there was snow on the maple in the backyard and a cardinal on the fence, and the whole world looked exactly like it always had, and nothing felt real. I called my daughter. She didn't answer. I called my daughter. She didn't answer. I called Kevin. He didn't answer either. I called my daughter's cell, her work number, their home number. Nothing. That evening, she texted me. Just, "Hi, Mom, everything okay?" I wrote back, "I got a letter from the bank. I need to talk to you." She called me 20 minutes later. Her voice was different, not the careful, measured voice from before. This voice was bright and casual, slightly too fast, like she was performing normalcy. "Oh, that," she said. "Yes, I was going to tell you. We had a bit of a cash flow issue because of the Vancouver market. You just know what it's been like. And Timothy said it made sense to move some of the funds temporarily while we sorted out the investment structure. It's all still yours, Mum. It's not gone anywhere." "That's $20,000, I said. "It's temporary. You moved $20,000 out of my account without asking me." A pause. "You're on the account together. That's what joint means. I want to tell you that I lost my temper then. I want to tell you that I said something sharp and definitive, but the truth is that I sat there in my kitchen and I felt something much worse than anger. I felt stupid. I felt like I had walked into a room knowing something was wrong and sat down anyway, and now I was trying to figure out how much damage had been done while keeping my voice steady enough that my daughter wouldn't hear me cry. "I want the money back," I said, "by the end of the week." She said, "Of course." She said it was just temporary. She said I was overreacting and that she'd been trying to help me. The money did not come back by the end of the week. I called my RBC advisor, Marion, on a Thursday morning. She had handled my finances since I was in my 40s, and she was the kind of woman who didn't waste words. I told her what had happened. There was silence on the line, and then she said, "Sylvia, we need to talk about your accounts, all of them." What Marion found when she started looking was worse than $20,000. Over a period of 8 months, starting about 6 months after my husband died, when I was at my most disoriented, my most absent from my own life, my daughter had been moving money, small amounts at first, $3,000 here, $5,000 there. The kind of amounts that a grieving woman might miss if she wasn't checking closely, which I hadn't been. Then larger amounts, accelerating in the fall when she'd started the phone calls about Kevin's advisor, when she'd been building the case for consolidating everything, when, I understand now, she had been worried I was about to look more carefully at my statements. In total, she had moved $67,000. $67,000 that my husband and I had saved over a lifetime of teaching salaries and sensible choices, the money that was supposed to see me through retirement. That was supposed to mean I didn't have to worry about the furnace or the property taxes or the years after 70 when I might not want to drive anymore. Marian walked me through what we needed to do. She removed my daughter from every joint account immediately. She helped me document everything for the bank's fraud department. She did not say, "I told you so," about the joint account situation, though she would have been entitled to. She said, "You didn't do anything wrong, Sylvia. This was someone you trusted." I filed a report with Halton Regional Police the following Monday. The officer I spoke to was patient and thorough, and I sat across from her at a desk and gave her every bank statement and every screenshot of my daughter's texts, and I was very calm right up until the moment she asked me to confirm the name of the person who had made the transfers. And then I had to stop and look at my hands for a moment before I could answer. My daughter's name is Fiona. She's 37 years old. She has her father's eyes and my grandmother's stubbornness, and she once drove 4 hours through a snowstorm to bring me soup when I had the flu. She was the maid of honor at my colleague's wedding. She coached a girls' soccer team in Vancouver for 2 years. She is a person I thought I knew completely. When the police called her, she told them it had been a misunderstanding, that I'd been confused since her father died, that I'd had a hard time managing my finances, that she'd been trying to help, and that I'd consented to the transfers. I had texts, I had emails, I had every transaction documented. I also had every transaction documented. I also had, it turned out, something she hadn't counted on. The house on Maple Grove. The house she and Kevin had apparently told Timothy could be worth somewhere between $1.2 and $1.4 million in the current market. The house that showed up in a text between Kevin and someone I didn't know. A text my son-in-law had accidentally forwarded to me instead of to his contact, was not simply in my name. When my husband and I had redone our estate documents after he was diagnosed, 12 years before he died, our lawyer had helped us set it up in a family trust, a very specific family trust, with very specific terms that required the consent of all 3 named trustees before any sale or transfer of the property could take place. The 3 trustees were my husband, me, and my brother in Hamilton. My daughter did not know about my brother. Kevin had apparently told her the house would be easy to access once I'd moved everything into Timothy's management. He did not know about the trust. Timothy, who had been brought in after the fact, had not been shown the original property documents. They had built an entire financial plan around a house that was, legally, not mine to sell unilaterally, and not Fiona's to access at all. My brother called me when the police contacted him as a named trustee. He said, "Sylvia, I have been waiting for someone to tell me what is happening." He drove to Oakville that weekend and sat at my kitchen table, and we went through everything together, and he was the first person I cried in front of. Properly cried, not just the careful, quiet tears I'd been managing since the police report. I sat at the same table opened that bank letter, and I cried for a long time, and my brother made tea and didn't try to make me stop. And eventually I said, "I keep thinking about the day of the funeral." She held my arm the whole time. He said, "I know." The investigation took most of the following year. Fiona hired a lawyer. Kevin hired a lawyer. There were months when I did not hear from my daughter directly, only through legal channels, and I won't pretend those months were anything other than what they were. I went to work in my garden. I called Wanda more than I ever had. I just sat at my table some Sundays and had dinner with my brother and his wife, and we talked about other things, and sometimes that was the best part of the week. Marian helped me rebuild what she could. The pension was intact. The house was intact. Some of the RRSPs had been moved into accounts we were able to recover through the bank's fraud process. In the end, between the civil recovery and what the bank's insurance covered, I got back just over $40,000 of the $67,000. The rest I had to accept was gone. Fiona received a conditional discharge and was ordered to repay $22,000 through a structured payment plan. She did not go to prison. The Crown Attorney explained to me why, and I understood the reasoning, and I sat with it for a long time before I decided how I felt about it. Kevin left her. I don't know whether that surprises you. It surprised me. It turned out that the plan, the consolidation, Timothy, the conversations about the house, had been primarily his idea, and when the legal reality of what they'd done became clear, he found reasons to distance himself. He moved back to Alberta before the proceedings were finished. Fiona found herself alone in a Vancouver apartment with a court-ordered debt, no husband, and a mother who had filed a police report against her. She called me 8 months after the conditional discharge. It was a Sunday afternoon in March, and I was making soup, and I almost didn't answer. I let it ring for a long time. Then I picked up. She said my name, and then she didn't say anything else for a moment, and in that silence I could hear 37 years. I could hear the kid who cried when she got her ears pierced, and the teenager who stayed up all night before her university applications, and the adult who had held my arm at her father's grave. I could also hear the woman who had told a police officer that her grieving mother had consented to $67,000 in transfers. I'm not ready, I said. I want you to know, I answered. But I'm not ready. She said okay. She calls every few weeks now. Sometimes I answer. We don't talk about the money, not directly. We talk around things. It is a slow and careful process, like learning to walk again on a joint that healed wrong. I don't know where it will end up. I am 66 years old, and I have been a teacher long enough to know that people can change, that growth is real, that the worst thing someone has done is not the only thing they are. But I have also been alone long enough to know that I am not responsible for making that growth easy for her. What I want to say to anyone listening to this, anyone who got a call from a son or daughter, or someone they trusted completely, anyone who is sitting at a table right now with a letter from the bank or a text that doesn't quite add up, is this: grief is not stupidity. Loving someone is not a character flaw. The fact that she was able to do this to me is not evidence that I was foolish. It is evidence that she made a choice, and I made choices too. After, I called Marion. I called the police. I called my brother. I did not let the shame of it, and there is shame, even when you are the victim, even when you know intellectually that the shame belongs to someone else. I did not let that shame keep me quiet or keep me still. The house on Maple Grove is still mine. I had the locks changed in February, not because I thought she'd come back to it, but because I needed to do something physical and deliberate. I walked through every room after the locksmith left, and I touched the walls, and I thought about my husband, who had trusted me completely with everything, and I thought about how he would have handled this. And I decided he would have been angrier than me, and then he would have told me to go make something in the garden. So I did. That spring, I put in a raised bed along the back fence. Tomatoes, zucchini, a few rows of kale I'm still not entirely sure what to do with. My neighbor came over the fence and told me the tomatoes looked healthy, and we stood there in the sun for a while, talking about nothing in particular. And it was one of those ordinary moments that feels, when you've been through something, almost unbearably good. I did not need Kevin's advisor. I didn't need a family trust. I didn't understand. I needed the trust I already had in myself, in the people who had shown up without being asked, in the slow, unremarkable process of putting one day after the next until the days added up to something that felt like mine again. The greatest thing my husband left me was not the house or the savings or the pension. It was 38 years of evidence that I was worth protecting. I just had to be the one to do it. There's a moment I keep coming back to. I'm sitting at the kitchen table with that bank letter in my hands, and through the window I can see the cardinal on the back fence and the snow on the maple, and everything looks exactly the way it always has. That's the part that stays with me. Not the rage, not even the grief, but the ordinariness of the world, while something inside me was quietly breaking apart. What Fiona did to me had consequences, not because the universe was keeping score, and not because some force outside of us arranges punishments to fit crimes, but because choices have weight, and weight lands somewhere eventually. She chose to reach into the life her father and I built together and take from it while I was still learning how to be a person without him. That choice cost her her marriage, her credibility, and years of the kind of easy closeness with me that you can't manufacture once it's gone. I didn't leave a note in Mississauga with a kind of person it takes to do what she did, and I don't say that with contempt. I say it as someone who taught young people for 31 years and watched them make decisions that shaped who they became. Doing right by someone when it costs you something is not a small thing. It is, in fact, the only thing that actually builds a person from the inside out. Fiona hadn't built that muscle. Kevin had given her a framework where the numbers mattered more than the person the numbers belonged to, and she had accepted it. That is not a permanent condition, but it is a real one, and it had real consequences for both of them. What I had to find in myself during that year was something harder than anger. Anger was easy. What was harder was staying clear-headed when everything felt like it was designed to make me doubt myself. When her lawyer implied I'd been confused since my husband died, when the process was slow and expensive and exhausting, when I had to keep choosing to trust my own memory of what had happened. That kind of clarity, the kind you have to defend over and over again, is not something I had fully understood before. I understood it after. And then there was the question of what came next. Not forgiveness as a performance, not reconciliation for the sake of appearances, but the slow and honest work of deciding what I actually wanted my life to look like. I planted tomatoes. I called my brother on Sundays. I let Marion show me what was recoverable, and I stopped grieving what wasn't. I answered Fiona's call that Sunday in March, not because I was ready to forgive her, but because I was ready to be a person who could decide, one conversation at a time, what was worth salvaging. The trust my husband left me, in the legal sense, yes, but I mean the other kind too, was that he had spent 38 years treating me like someone worth protecting, someone whose judgment was sound, someone capable of handling hard things. When Fiona tried to rewrite that, tried to frame me as a confused widow who needed managing, the thing that saved me was that I had 38 years of evidence that said otherwise. I'm 66 now. I don't know how this ends with my daughter. I know that the house is still mine, that the garden came back this spring, and that I made it through something I would not have chosen and did not deserve, and I came out still recognizably myself. That, I've decided, is enough.